welcome to what will be the second of 3 Halloween-themed episodes of Get Real. If you recall, back during the summer, we thought we weren't even going to get one, so we decided to make the Haunted Mansion episode a Halloween-themed one. Turns out I was able to plan up another one, and we're not even done. There's going to be another Halloween-themed episode because there's a movie that we want to see towards the end of the month. So that's also going to be a Halloween-themed episode. So there's going to be 3 Halloween episodes of Get Real.
Oh, good for you!
And this episode is going to be very unique. That's why it's not going to, we don't have like a crazy background, or we're not even doing it in the media room, and there wasn't a big intro or, you know, and none of that crap. This is going to be a very standard episode, and the reason why is because we are going to talk about a movie that is very special in the movie hemisphere. In film history, it's an extremely special film. And it's very unique that I'm going to review this movie because, you see, it's a movie that I've never seen before. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone alive today who has ever seen this film. I'm talking about the legendary 1927 silent film London After Midnight, starring the man of 1,000 faces, Lon Chaney. I'm standing up so you can't see, but I am wearing a Phantom of the Opera t-shirt. That was from his Phantom that he did in 1925. We also got the poster back there. I thought this would be an appropriate atmospheric type thing to have Lon Chaney kind of everywhere.
Okay.
But anyway, so I want to talk about this movie, and the reason why, one of the reasons why I want to talk about it, one of the main reasons, is the fact that it is a lost film. It was destroyed in the 1965 MGM Vault Fire, which destroyed many, many prints of famous movies and causing them to be lost forever. And so that's where London After Midnight comes in, is that it is currently a lost film. But what makes it so unique is that it is the most sought after silent film in film history. It's not just one of the most sought after silent films, it's one of the most sought after films ever, because everybody wants to see this particular film, and it's because of this. That's right, a little jump scare there for you. That is Lon Chaney's character from London After Midnight. It's called The Man in the Beaver Hat. They were real creative back then. Almost as creative as filmmakers are today. Have you seen Exorcist Believer?
Don't be scared.
We've met before.
Yeah, so anyway, the Man in the Beaver Hat. But actually, that's just one of 2 roles that Lon Chaney played in this film. He also plays a detective named Burke. Now, the movie is a horror film, but it's also a murder mystery film. It's a whodunit type film. A gentleman named Roger Balfour is found dead in his home, and it's ruled a suicide by the police. But the detective on the case, Detective Burke, played by Lon Chaney, feels like there's something more nefarious that went on here. Well, 5 years later, all of a sudden, mysterious lights come on into the Balfour mansion that's been abandoned these last 5 years, and they realize that the occupants now of the mansion are this horrid creature, this man in a beaver hat with a wild grin and huge eyes, and this catatonic ghost-like woman. They are the new tenants, and some are wondering, is this the ghost of Roger Balfour? Is he haunting the mansion? There's a lot of what-ifs and what's going ons here in this film, and then where the horror comes in is that this beaver hat man starts to terrorize the people in the neighboring mansion, doing all kinds of just scary things, including just materializing in front of people and basically staring at them while they sleep. I mean, it's pretty creepy stuff. To make a long story short, too late. Spoiler alert. As it turns out, the man in the beaver hat was actually Detective Burke. And the original title of this film was called The Hypnotist. It was based on a story called The Hypnotist. And Detective Burke is a hypnotist. And he was able to lure one of the main characters in the film, I forget exactly who it is, but one of the main characters in the film to the mansion, hypnotize him, and basically make him admit that he was the murderer of Roger Balfour from 5 years prior. And once that happens, the man in the beaver hat reveals himself to be Detective Burke, and the story has a happy ending. But what makes the movie so unique was the performance of Lon Chaney. Not as Detective Burke, but obviously as the man in the beaver hat. See, the man in the beaver hat is supposed to be like a vampire type character, and that's why he lurks around at night trying to terrorize the inhabitants of the neighboring house, is because he's trying to get their attention. And he does very well. And so that's why this movie is so sought after, is because the performance of Lon Chaney was apparently terrorizing. Apparently it was so scary that one man actually committed a murder. That's right, a man in London claimed that he unalived a woman because he was so messed up from Lon Chaney's performance in London After Midnight. Luckily, the police didn't buy that, and of course he was sent to prison. But it wasn't too far of the imagination for Lon Chaney's performance to freak somebody out to the point that they just lose their mind, they have a nervous breakdown. Speaking of that movie back there, The Phantom of the Opera, when that movie came out 2 years prior to London After Midnight, the reveal of Chaney's face was so terrorizing that people passed out in the theater, got nauseous and had to leave to vomit or whatever. Children ran from the theater.
And he says, how close we to that moment. How close we are, and I'm getting close. And just as we got to it, he says, I've got to see my mother.
To this day, the reveal of the Phantom's face in the original Phantom of the Opera film is still one of the scariest moments in film history. So you can imagine how in 1927, when Lon Chaney was playing yet another monster, people flocked to the theater in order to see this. And that's the thing, is like, we can only imagine. Probably nobody alive today has seen this movie. Maybe Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was 3 at the time that this movie came out, so maybe, I don't know, maybe his parents were like, he won't remember this film, let's take him to see it. And maybe he saw it. Or Dick Van Dyke, I think he would have been like 1 or 2 at the time. Maybe it was just like a night on the town and they couldn't find a babysitter, so they took the kid with them to the horror movie. I don't know. But yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to actually find someone alive today who's actually seen that movie. And that's so sad, because from the looks of it, it looks like it's an incredible film. But there were some detractors of the film too. Historian John C. Marsalis commented, despite all the mythology and excitement over the film, all indications are that it would be a disappointment if uncovered today. And here's where I get even more jealous. Oh, I'm so jealous about this right here.
Let it go.
Film historian William K. Everson and David Bradley claimed that they saw a print of the film in 1950, some 15 years before the Vault Fire destroyed it. And they both admitted that it was inferior to what would end up being a remake that came out a few years later, and we'll get to that. But there were even some famous film goers from the 1920s that said it wasn't as great a film as a lot of people would say.
One tends to get excited about lost films. I think people would be very disappointed if they saw London After Midnight. I didn't enjoy it anything like as much as The Phantom.
A lot of people say The Phantom of the Opera was scarier than London After Midnight, which I probably would agree with, because that was a very terrifying performance. The reason why these performances by Lon Chaney were so terrifying to begin with was the fact that the man was a legend when it came to makeup effects. You see, back in the day, back during that time period in the 1920s, there was no union for makeup artists and for people who worked on films. So, you know, studios may have had makeup artists, but it wasn't mandatory that they work on a film, especially if the actor shows up, the lead actor shows up on the set and says, hey, I can do my own makeup. And that's what happened, was that Lon Chaney did all of his own makeup for all of his movies. He was the Phantom of the Opera, of course. He did London After Midnight, The Monster. He did a ton of films. A couple of films where he dressed up as clowns and absolutely nailed the makeup. And it's important that we're doing this review of London After Midnight this year, right now, because we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of Lon Chaney's first major makeup film role, which was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which came out in 1923. That movie wowed audiences everywhere, so it was only natural that Universal would pick him again for The Phantom of the Opera. These makeup effects just sealed the deal when it came to London After Midnight, and so he was the clear choice to play the man in the beaver hat, and he nailed it, at least in terms of stills. You look at these pictures, you see all these different pictures of him in this costume, in this makeup, and you can only think, man, he must have been terrifying in this movie. But then there's people that say he wasn't as terrifying. So again, it's kind of left up to the imagination of what, you know, the movie was. Again, we can't review it. We can't say one way or the other if he was good at it or not, because the movie, by all accounts, no longer exists.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
But the director of this film is a legend. It was Todd Browning. Todd Browning would go on to direct Dracula in 1931, which became a huge mega hit.
I bid you welcome.
And of course sealed the deal as sort of like the first of the talkie era of the classic Universal horror monsters. For as sought after as this film is, at the time it was released, it got lukewarm reviews. A lot of people said that it wasn't as scary as one might think. A lot of people did not praise Lon Chaney's performance. They said it was lackluster compared to some of his other performances. And the movie, though it was a success, it was a little lower on the success scale as past Lon Chaney films. And most likely the reason why it's so beloved and talked about to this day is because of the fact that it's lost. And by all accounts, it's probably never going to be found. It was lost in that vault fire in 1965, but film historians are determined to find a copy somewhere. There has to be somewhere in the world, some vault somewhere that has another print of this film. But we say that about a lot of silent films from that era. There are so many films that ended up being lost, many Lon Chaney films on top of that, that have just disappeared from time, whether they just literally disappeared, maybe are stored somewhere that we can't find, or were destroyed. Because a lot of times films were just destroyed because they reused the film, or they reused the silver. They used something that would destroy the film so that they could create more film. Obviously, there was no home video back then or streaming services, so what the hell were you going to do with the movie after you showed it in theaters? It was just going to collect dust on a shelf somewhere. So why not make good use of the film and film it over something else? But if it was a film you really liked and you really thought it would hold value for future audiences, you put it in the vault and you hope that it stays safe. But there have been so many studio vault fires over the last 50-70 years that so many movies have gotten lost, and London After Midnight was a casualty of one of them, unfortunately. But we are determined, we are still determined, maybe one day we can find this film and we can actually view it for ourselves. You know, I've been disappointed before. There's been many films where I wanted to see and were disappointed by the outcome of them. Like, oh, this is what I was excited about, you know. But I would love to still make that determination if London After Midnight is a good enough film to sit through. You know, I would love to review it for you and tell you if you should watch it. But regardless if it's found or not, it's definitely made its point in pop culture because it lives on to this day. As a matter of fact, in 1935, there was a remake, a talking remake of the film called Mark of the Vampire. Now, sadly, Lon Chaney had passed away by this point. He died in 1930, so he couldn't reprise his role as the vampire, the man in the beaver hat. So they went to the next best thing, which at that point was the best thing. They hired the man who could play a vampire better than anybody else on the planet. Of course, I'm talking about Bela Lugosi. Dracula himself. He played the vampire in that movie. So if you want a kind of an idea of what London After Midnight was, you could go check out Mark of the Vampire. It's a good film. I actually like Mark of the Vampire, and those two film historians say it was better too. So if you want a representation of the film, you should check out Mark of the Vampire because it is a really good film. And this is one of the most awesome things ever. In 2002, the brilliant minds at Turner Classic Movies recreated London After Midnight with stills from the movie, pictures from different scenes of the film. You know, every film has a photographer, and they take 1,000,000 pictures of everybody in costume. They take pictures of scenes, you know, where they'll do the scene and then they'll recreate the scene for, like, you know, a picture, you know, a photo op, and they took hundreds of those, and they were able to piece them together in order by following the script of the film and created this still version of the film. And so that exists today, along with, you know, a music soundtrack and everything. It sounds wonderful, and it can be found on this. This is the Lon Chaney collection that was put out by Turner Classic Movies in 2003. It is a fantastic set. It has 3 Lon Chaney movies, as well as the awesome documentary Lon Chaney, 1,000 Faces, narrated by Kenneth Branagh, and it has interviews from all just legends of the 20th century all in here. And of course, one of the special features is the still remake of London After Midnight. So you definitely need to check this out. If you were interested in it, I think it's available on Amazon, eBay, wherever you can find DVDs. I highly recommend checking this out. And if you're a Disney fan, now this has never been fully confirmed. I cannot say one way or the other if this has been confirmed or not, but if you're a Disney fan, more notably the theme parks, Disneyland and Disney World, you may be familiar with a little ride called The Haunted Mansion. In fact, you may be familiar with a little film that came out this past summer called Haunted Mansion. We did a little review of that film, and the antagonist of that film, as well as one of the characters in the Disneyland Haunted Mansion and soon to be in the Disney World Haunted Mansion, is this guy. The Hatbox Ghost. Now, after showing you those pictures of Lon Chaney in his makeup, does this guy not look a little familiar to you? Again, this cannot be confirmed one way or the other, but a lot of people speculate that a lot of inspiration for the look of the Hatbox Ghost came from London After Midnight, Lon Chaney's beaver hat guy from London After Midnight. And I mean, the resemblance is uncanny. I mean, it has to be true. I mean, what else could it be? It has to be. So the Hatbox Ghost, I would like to say, is inspired from London After Midnight. Chaney's character also inspired the look of the titular character, the Babadook, and both the penguin from Batman Returns and the mask that was used in the film The Black Phone has been compared to Chaney's London After Midnight character. So I can't really give my recommendation for London After Midnight. Again, you can't watch it. Now, you can watch that still version of it with the music behind it if you would like. It's really good. You can also watch Mark of the Vampire, which I highly recommend. I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to, so I mean, it is a good film, so I would give it a shot if you'd like to watch it. But, you know, the fact is, though, London After Midnight is a film that deserves to be remembered one way or the other. And we like to remember it as just a piece of the amazing history of the man of 1,000 faces, Lon Chaney. Now, in the near future, I've been planning this since we started Superfuss Productions. I wanted to do an entire Get Real exclusive on the career of Lon Chaney, and I'm still going to do that. So I don't want to talk too much about Lon Chaney. I mean, obviously, I love the man to death, but I don't want to talk too much about him until we do the exclusive on his career. But I do want to point out that, I mean, his characters are incredible. They hold up to this day. A lot of that makeup that he did back then could not, I mean, it holds up. Especially the Phantom of the Opera, that makeup holds up to this day. And that's why it makes me even more upset that we don't have London After Midnight, so we can see just how good it was, other than the pictures that we have. But regardless, London After Midnight lives on in here. Lives on in here, it certainly does. So I would recommend adding Mark of the Vampire and or the picture version of London After Midnight to your Halloween viewing, because they deserve it. And that's my review of London After Midnight. Yeah, that's it. I don't really have any exit strategy here, so I'ma just go. Okay, bye. No jump scares. I promise, there's no jump scare at the end of this. No jump scare. None at all. I wouldn't do that to you. Nope, none. No jump scares. Stop looking at me like that. I'm not going to give you any jump scares, okay? Just go. Go.